when Scott Servais was hired, he was Jerry Dipoto's selection. He'd never been a field manager before. And I remember there was a guy that I've known for a number of years. Our paths have crossed a couple times, though I don't think we've ever actually worked together. But he's covered baseball for 25 years. And I asked him about the new GM, new manager, just like, what do you think? And he talked about how open and warm Jerry Dipoto was, and then he indicated that Scott Servais is kind of a jerk. He used a different word for that. And in baseball reporters, it's not a criticism. It's an observation, because there are baseball lifers who are just kind of like, they're intense dudes. There's a very specific type of baseball grump that's out there. And that person is not overly friendly. They've got an edge to everything they do. And for someone like Servais, who carved out a major league career, I thought that intensity is probably what he needed to stay in the big leagues, to have the career that he had, that he wasn't somebody that gave anything away, that could be kind of tough to be around. Like, there's lots of different terms that baseball people have for it, whether it's having a red behind, which is one of the more common ones. It's just an irritable and kind of generally unpleasant kind of personality. And that can be a useful cog in a team. That's the personality I thought Seattle was going to have as a manager. I thought they were going to have somebody who was hard driving, really didn't accept much in the way of excuses, and was kind of difficult and abrasive. I couldn't have been more wrong. And in the 6 years that Scott Servais has been here, he's been given a really complicated job. It's changed. He inherited a team with 4 really high-paid veterans in Nelson Cruz, Robinson Cano, Felix Hernandez, and Kyle Seager, and was told, okay, we're going to try to get younger around them, but we're going to try to get to the playoffs building it around those 4 guys. And after 3 years, in which they had the 5th best record in the American League that time, so if your goal was to get a wild card berth, they figures you would have had it in one of those years. The way it worked out, they never got a wild card berth. They had the 5th best overall record, yet never had the 5th best record in one of those seasons. And then they rebuild. And Scott Servais, through it all, has been this warm, engaging personality who you feel creates a really intense bond with his players.
You have to adapt as a coach, and I think that's probably why, right? I mean, if you've had these young players that you're working with for a couple of seasons, after a while, you're probably going to realize that the old way didn't work. It is interesting that you note, though, Danny, all of the different kind of teams that he has managed. And to go back in time to 2018 maybe, ask Servais about that team and what it taught him going forward, I'm sure that there are some lessons learned along the way. You're going to be, I would imagine, a little bit more attached to a team full of younger players, though.
Probably. Your word's going to have a little bit more of an impact on them. They're going to respond to that a little bit more. Yeah, I could see that.
And there's not really an established player, let's say a Robinson Cano or someone else who you look at.
Felix was the one where you have to navigate around him. Like, that dude's contract's big enough. He's not going anywhere. I guess Seager a little bit, but Seager plays every day. Seager's someone that's dependable and reliable.
We've had that question about whether or not coaches have a shelf life on this very show before.
Yes.
And they do, but it depends on how many of the same players are with them over a long period of time. For example, in Boston, Terry Francona and that Red Sox team, they were great together, but they were all together for a really long period of time. And I think that a degree of comfort settles in for either the manager or the players, and you saw how it sort of unfolded in 2011. So with this team, now that is completely different from the teams of the past, where you got a bunch of young guys who don't know really anything other than what Scott Servais is as a manager, it's actually a hidden benefit here. And it's also a reason to extend him, because you want this to keep going forward, as opposed to bringing somebody else in who has to feel all these guys out, who has to win their respect, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that would be an uphill battle for anyone else who comes in, especially with all the things that they've been through this year.
The reason you should extend him, the reason why he deserves a significant raise, the reason why he should be considered one of the candidates for Manager of the Year is embodied in his reaction to that game. It's embodied to him getting choked up by that. That feeling of pride that he feels to coach, to manage a team that is exhibiting the toughness, that it's not even like, hey, I made them that tough. It's that, like, I can't believe how tough these guys are. that he's inspired by the way that they're playing with all of the different things that they've been through, all of the injuries along their pitching staff. And, oh, by the way, this was a team this was a team that started out, Kendall Graveman trade, all of those things. And this was a team that started out with people around baseball saying they're rebuilding. They're going to win 75 games. They're going to win 78 games.
They're the worst team in baseball, like John Heyman.
And to be where they are, 10 games above 500, and to have your manager feeling that way about the way his players are playing, about the culture that it is, that's why you extend him. Because you want somebody like that in charge of this team.
He has their backs, and he does, I think, a very good job in a difficult situation, which is to, I think, keep players of the mindset that whatever might be going on upstairs, whether it's Kevin Mather or anything else, it is removed entirely from what we do on the field. And when you have a team that has had a 20-year playoff drought, that kind of a buffer is important. And how much of a buffer Servais is, well, I mean, we'll find out, I imagine, during the offseason in terms of how people truly feel about with this team, if they want to stay with it in spite of perhaps some of the things that have been said or implied going forward, like, for example, Kyle Seager's future, uncertainty about Mitch Haniger's future. But he has done, I think, an incredible job of navigating through all of this. And while, his job is essentially to do what the general manager tells him, it's also to be not necessarily a psychologist, but the kind of person who is going to keep everything even-keeled. Because it's a long season, and you're going to have disastrous moments like series against San Diego where you get absolutely destroyed, and you have to step up right after they happen.
Some people will argue you pick a manager for a specific team. I think Scott Servais in his 6 years here has shown that he is a manager that you pick for a franchise because you want the way he interacts with players. He's had a veteran team that was trying to sneak into the playoffs. He's had a young team in which you're building toward the future. And in each case, he's shown the ability to get results from those kind of players, all the while keeping the younger players who you want to be growing around, because that is the secret in baseball, is getting young, capable, improving, cost-controlled players while keeping them developing with you. And this year should be an absolute affirmation of that. The question for me isn't, do you keep him? The question is, how far do you go to make sure you keep him? Because he's done so much. He has been the person that is, in a lot of ways, sort of watching how this team has weathered. If we give them credit for the resilience, the manager, above and beyond the players, is the first person in line for that. Credit the players for the way that they've come back. Credit the manager for creating the environment in which they have bounced back.
I'm curious as to what happens as far as ownership and how they handle this. I saw in a piece with Ryan Divish in the Seattle Times where he was asked, hey, what's going on? Why haven't we seen a Jerry Dipoto extension? And on the same lines, why haven't we seen a Scott Servais extension? And I do wonder if maybe it is something like money that could be the issue. Again, I don't know the specifics, but that was one of the theories that was floated there. And it is surprising that nothing has been decided yet, because I feel like even with 40 games left, who's thinking to themselves, no, they can't go with this next year for either of those two?
I don't think anybody feels that way. And there are unknowns that we have in terms of the timing, and it might be a matter of they're waiting to announce it. But I certainly hope, and I think everybody in Seattle is hoping that he is back